Imagine a region where history, conflict, and hope collide. A place where every ceasefire is watched by the world, yet the real story is often hidden beneath headlines. Today, we will explore the Israel-Hamas ceasefire, not to assign blame, but to understand the facts, the people, and the possibilities for peace. Stay with me, because what we uncover together is a lesson in history, strategy, and humanity that can inspire how we see the world and the power of hope, even in the most challenging circumstances. The Israel-Hamas conflict is not a recent phenomenon, but the result of decades of intertwined political, territorial, and social developments in the Middle East. Its roots can be traced back to the mid-20th century, when the creation of the State of Israel in 1948 led to the displacement of hundreds of thousands of Palestinians, a historical event that continues to influence regional dynamics today. Over the years, a series of wars, uprisings, and political agreements have shaped the landscape, including the Six-Day War of 1967, the Oslo Accords in the 1990s, and multiple Gaza conflicts. Each of these events left deep imprints on the perceptions, grievances, and strategies of the parties involved, making any current ceasefire a continuation of a long, complex narrative rather than an isolated event. Understanding these historical underpinnings is essential to interpreting the motives and implications of current developments. The population in Gaza and the surrounding territories has endured repeated cycles of conflict and reconstruction, creating a context in which ceasefires are not only political tools, but also critical moments for humanitarian relief and social resilience. At the same time, Israel's security considerations, shaped by decades of facing rocket attacks and tunnel infiltrations, influence its approach to negotiations and temporary halts in hostilities. International involvement has always played a significant role, whether through direct mediation, economic aid, or political pressure, reflecting the region's global significance. The history of failed or partial agreements has made both local actors and the international community cautious, aware that a temporary cessation of violence may not immediately translate into long-term stability. Recognizing the historical context helps to clarify why each side interprets ceasefires differently, often viewing them through the lens of past experiences rather than purely present circumstances. It also illuminates why external observers, including governments and media outlets worldwide, are attentive to patterns rather than single events, analyzing whether current developments mark a genuine opportunity for peace or are another instance of strategic maneuvering. By examining this historical framework, one can approach the current Israel-Hamas situation with a nuanced understanding, appreciating the layers of political, social, and territorial factors that shape the behavior of all parties involved, while remaining aware of the broader humanitarian and diplomatic implications. Ceasefires between Israel and Hamas are complex instruments that serve multiple purposes beyond simply stopping violence. They are often temporary arrangements that reflect both immediate humanitarian needs and longer-term strategic considerations. While a ceasefire may appear as a straightforward pause in hostilities, it is usually the product of careful negotiation, pressure from international actors, and calculations made by both sides regarding their short-term and long-term goals. For civilians in conflict zones, these pauses can mean the difference between life and death, allowing access to food, water, medical care, and safe passage out of dangerous areas. Humanitarian corridors often become operational only during such periods, highlighting the crucial role that ceasefires play in alleviating immediate suffering. At the same time, the strategic dimension cannot be ignored. Parties may use ceasefires to regroup, reposition forces, repair infrastructure, or consolidate political advantage, which can make the true intent behind a ceasefire difficult to interpret without careful observation. International mediators and observers often attempt to verify compliance, monitor the cessation of hostilities, and encourage further dialogue. But the fragility of these arrangements means that any violation can quickly escalate tensions. The terms of ceasefires are frequently specific, including limitations on military operations, restrictions on movement, and agreements on prisoner exchanges or humanitarian access. These terms reflect the delicate balance between maintaining security and meeting humanitarian obligations. Historical patterns show that even short-term agreements can evolve into longer-term negotiations if both parties perceive a mutual benefit, though equally many ceasefires have been broken within days or weeks. The perception of fairness and reciprocity plays a significant role in compliance, as does the influence of external actors who may provide guarantees, funding, or political pressure. Media coverage often emphasizes whether a ceasefire holds or is broken, but the underlying dynamics are more nuanced, involving strategic, political, and social calculations that extend beyond immediate headlines. By examining ceasefires with attention to both their humanitarian function and strategic implications, it becomes clear that they are more than temporary pauses. They are pivotal moments that can shape the trajectory of the broader conflict. Recognizing the multiplicity of purposes served by ceasefires helps observers, policymakers, and the public to assess their significance accurately and to avoid oversimplifying their intent or potential impact. The international perspective on the Israel-Hamas ceasefire is diverse, reflecting the strategic, political, and humanitarian interests of countries and organizations around the world. Different states approach the situation based on their historical alliances, geopolitical priorities, and domestic considerations. Some nations emphasize the immediate need to protect civilians and provide humanitarian aid, advocating for a swift and robust implementation of ceasefires to ensure food, medical assistance, and safe evacuation for those affected by the conflict. Others focus on the long-term stability of the region, recognizing that temporary pauses in violence, while necessary for humanitarian reasons, must be accompanied by diplomatic efforts to address underlying political and security challenges. International organizations such as the United Nations often play a dual role, monitoring adherence to ceasefire agreements and facilitating negotiations between parties while also coordinating relief efforts on the ground. Their involvement seeks to ensure that the ceasefire is not merely symbolic, but produces tangible benefits for the affected populations. Global reactions are also shaped by media coverage and public opinion, which can influence the diplomatic stance of governments and international bodies. Statements issued by world leaders may highlight commitments to peace and stability, yet they often reflect a cautious balance, as overt criticism of either side can impact international relations and future mediation efforts. The international community also considers the potential ripple effects of the ceasefire on neighboring countries and regional dynamics. Tensions in one area can influence trade, security cooperation, and refugee flows across borders, making international engagement crucial. Moreover, countries may offer guarantees, monitoring mechanisms, or incentives to encourage compliance with the ceasefire, reinforcing the perception that these agreements are part of a larger diplomatic process rather than isolated events. Understanding these perspectives allows observers to see that the global response is not uniform, but consists of multiple layers of concern, including immediate human welfare, strategic calculations, and long-term regional stability. It also highlights why ceasefires are often accompanied by ongoing dialogue, international mediation, and a complex network of agreements designed to address both the immediate and broader consequences of the conflict. By examining international perspectives, it becomes evident that ceasefires cannot be interpreted in isolation. They are embedded within a broader framework of global diplomacy, regional interests, and humanitarian priorities that collectively shape the response of the world to this enduring conflict. The humanitarian impact of ceasefires in the Israel-Hamas conflict is profound, affecting millions of civilians who have endured prolonged periods of violence, displacement, and scarcity of essential resources. In areas directly affected by conflict, everyday life is severely disrupted, with access to clean water, food, medical supplies, and electricity often limited or entirely cut off. Ceasefires, even when temporary, provide critical windows of opportunity for relief organizations to deliver aid, evacuate the wounded, and restore essential services. Hospitals and clinics that have been operating under extreme pressure can receive supplies and personnel support, helping to prevent a complete collapse of healthcare infrastructure. Families trapped in conflict zones may be able to reach safer areas, and children who have been unable to attend school due to ongoing hostilities gain a brief respite that allows them to continue some form of education or psychosocial support. Humanitarian corridors, often negotiated as part of the ceasefire terms, become lifelines for affected communities, enabling the delivery of food, medicine, and other necessities, while also allowing residents to communicate with loved ones outside the conflict zone. Beyond immediate relief, ceasefires can offer temporary psychological reprieve for populations that have experienced repeated trauma. The constant threat of violence leaves lasting mental health challenges, including anxiety, depression, and post-traumatic stress, and even short periods of calm can help families regain a sense of normalcy and safety. While ceasefires do not resolve the underlying political or territorial disputes, they create tangible improvements in the daily lives of civilians, highlighting the human dimension of conflict. The international community often emphasizes this aspect when negotiating or supporting ceasefire agreements, understanding that the protection of human life and dignity must be central to any political arrangement. Observing the humanitarian consequences also provides insight into the real cost of conflict, reminding policymakers and the public that every escalation has immediate and measurable effects on vulnerable populations. By focusing on humanitarian outcomes, one can assess ceasefires not only as political instruments, but also as essential mechanisms for preserving life, alleviating suffering, and creating space for dialogue. The delivery of aid, the restoration of services, and the protection of civilians during these periods serve as crucial indicators of the ceasefire's effectiveness and demonstrate the moral and practical necessity of such temporary pauses in violence. Media coverage and public perception play a significant role in shaping how ceasefires between Israel and Hamas are understood globally. In a conflict marked by deep historical grievances and complex political dynamics, the way information is presented can influence public opinion, diplomatic reactions, and even the strategies of the parties involved. News outlets, social media platforms, and international correspondents often focus on whether a ceasefire holds or is broken, emphasizing dramatic developments such as rocket attacks, troop movements, or diplomatic statements. While these reports are important for informing the public, they may not always capture the nuanced reality of what a ceasefire entails, including humanitarian deliveries, temporary evacuations, or behind-the-scenes negotiations. Headlines can sometimes amplify fears or optimism disproportionately to the actual situation on the ground, leading to simplified narratives that overlook the strategic, humanitarian, and political layers of the agreement. For audiences seeking a factual understanding, it is essential to look beyond immediate reports and analyze verified information from multiple sources, including international organizations, on-the-ground observers, and official statements from both parties. The perception of ceasefires is also shaped by historical context. Prior agreements that were short-lived or violated may influence how current pauses in violence are interpreted, often causing skepticism or cautious optimism among the public and policymakers alike. Furthermore, media framing can affect international responses, as governments and organizations may adjust their diplomatic or humanitarian actions based on public sentiment and perceived legitimacy of the ceasefire. This interplay between perception and reality highlights the responsibility of journalists, analysts, and social media commentators to provide balanced, accurate, and context-rich coverage. By understanding how media and perception influence the discourse, one can better appreciate the challenges of evaluating ceasefires solely through headlines or social commentary. The public's understanding of whether a ceasefire is a genuine opportunity for peace or a tactical pause is mediated by the narratives presented across platforms, which may sometimes obscure the complexities of compliance, strategic motives, and humanitarian impact. A careful, informed approach that prioritizes verified facts, historical patterns, and the broader context allows for a more accurate and neutral assessment of ceasefires, helping observers, policymakers, and the international community to focus on practical outcomes rather than solely on perception or rhetoric. Recognizing the role of media and perception emphasizes the importance of critical analysis, ensuring that responses to ceasefires are grounded in reality, guided by evidence, and attentive to both immediate and long-term implications for the region. In conclusion, the situation between Israel and Hamas is complex and layered, shaped by decades of history, strategic considerations, humanitarian needs, and global attention. Ceasefires, whether temporary or long-term, are more than pauses in conflict. They are opportunities to protect lives, deliver aid, foster dialogue, and create pathways toward understanding. By examining the historical context, the nature of ceasefires, international perspectives, humanitarian impact, and the role of media, we gain a balanced and informed view of the realities on the ground. It reminds us that peace is not achieved through rhetoric alone, but through careful observation, empathy, and sustained effort. TS from all stakeholders involved. Good luck to all those working tirelessly for a more stable and peaceful Middle East. And thank you to everyone who takes the time to understand the true story behind the headlines, seeking knowledge over assumptions and compassion over conflict.